Righto, 1:25. We will reconvene the meeting. So, options are, we give the bus to the school, we keep the bus, we trade the bus, we do nothing, as in we trade the 20-seater, trade the 12-seater, and then than that. Or Councillor Arthur may have a community-led suggestion that might be possible, that could be worked out and further time be taken to consider whether, if that's suitable, then none of what we're discussing here may be required on behalf of the school.
Yes.
So, Councillor Arthur is aware of a bus that may be available for transfer in ownership, may be suitable for the school's use, and relieve a community group of an obligation that they're not perhaps very comfortable about, happy about, or need or want. Am I saying all of that right?
Yes.
Without giving names away?
Too much away.
Yeah. So we can resolve that we offer to just continue to work with the school provided, and that could be what Councillor Arthur can facilitate by way of his involvement with the community group. In your hands, do you want to add anything further to that?
No.
Okay. Counter offers, counter thoughts.
Through you, Mr Mayor, along those lines, are we looking to leave this on the table for another month to give time to talk to the school, and is that where we're going with this?
Well, I was thinking item C covers it, provide alternative solutions. It could be this, it could be other alternatives altogether, ones that were outlined at the start of the discussion.
Yeah, well, I'd prefer to see and hear what the alternative solution is for the school before we do anything with our own bus, whether we buy the 21-seater or downgrade.
27.
Yep.
Further thoughts?
If we, Mr Mayor, if we wait for Councillor Arthur's consultation with the community group, everything just carries on as now, as usual. The bus that we've got, paper it is, the school uses it, everything stays exactly how it is until we come up with a resolution next month. So what happens?
Pretty well.
Yeah.
We just hold this item over because there's more information just to see whether it might have already progressed. So let's just wait. We'll go to 349 and come back when I have more information. Can I have somebody move that we received the report, please? 349, MPI, and you're staying.
Unless there's expected discussion over it. If there's any discussion on, actually, I'll err on the side of caution. I'll go anyway. Probably best.
Councillor, somebody?
Yeah, that's right. We'll have an MPI.
In what we're about to discuss.
Yeah, I can say if there's discussion, if it's only receiving the report, yeah.
Right. Councillor Gleeson moves that we receive the report. Councillor Hanson seconds. All in favour, carried 4-0. Questions, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Yep.
I had one, I think it was a kitchen fit out for 25 grand or 50 grand, sorry. Was that figure included in the estimated completing costs of the 250,000 in stage 2?
No, the kitchen was a PC, so it was removed. The kitchen was removed from the budget when that project was approved back in February. So it was to construct. So that total budget of 600,000, which does look like being 50 overrun, would never included the kitchen. Just the room for it. The actual installation was a later project.
It was
There's a PC cost allowed in the original quote, the council removed that time of setting the quote.
Well, it was actually a lot higher than 50, if I remember right. PC cost was, no, it was what it was. Okay. So, you want to take them, do you want to go stage by stage? There's what it costs to design it. Get the planning stuff through, the different studies. Stage 1. There's a small amount left to complete there, which is the work they're doing with Gabion Baskets, is that right? Is that right?
Sorry.
There's still work. The work to still complete on stage 1 is the Gabion Baskets, is that right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Stage 2 looks like an overrun, but we won't know till project completion, is that right?
Yes.
So,
And hopefully that will be next month.
I haven't seen the latest program, Mr. Mayor, but I'm moving quite well at the moment.
so the tender that we approved for that to construct was for 600,000, that's right?
It's less than 600.
580 or something.
Okay. All right, so then let's allow a little bit on top of 580 for our costs, project management costs. How do we get 50 grand over?
Is that for the clubhouse building?
Yeah. Because
56.
it's constructed by others, so he just, unless we
The
approve.
planning costs.
Sorry.
Design and planning costs originally. And I think
So they weren't in the scope for the budget,
it wasn't a design and construct, we did the design.
and that was to be included in the
Many
six.
iterations of that design, so.
So when we approved the budget, when we approved the tender to construct, we knew then the budget would not be met because of costs already incurred. Now I'm going back in time here, this is February, but. Right. So that's where the mess ups happened. 580 plus a bit out of a $600,000 budget, and there's $70,000 in project management / design costs. We're not paying, where I'm going at, I'm not arguing about the tender or the budget or any of that. We're not paying the tenderer. There hasn't been any variations to the original tender. He'll still only get his, no, there has been.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's variations for construction of the jetty
Okay.
and also this is under this contract, but it's funded out of different buckets. So construction of the jetty, construction of the boat ramp, and construction of the pontoon.
But that won't be linked to the, or is that linked to the,
It's not linked to the 600.
no, that's all I mean. Sorry, just for the clubhouse.
It is under the contract, but it's not linked to that fund.
So it was under the contract to construct the clubhouse.
Yes.
All of those other matters as well. Pontoon, jetty. What was the other one?
Pontoon, jetty, and boat ramp.
Are they in the pontoon? Is the pontoon in the original 600?
No.
No.
And it's not going to be in the 650 either, is it?
So if you look at stage 1, Mr. Mayor, the budget 1970, the 70,000 is the jetty, so that's allowed for in that. At stage 1 development.
Mm-hmm.
The same builder.
Right, so there's variations, but so the actual clubhouse, we approved it at a construction cost in the order of 580,000. That will still get delivered for 580,000 by the tender. We're not going to have to pay the tender anymore to do his job. For that specific, not for the jetty pontoon.
Apart from the kitchen going back in.
Yeah, that's right, which is now separately budgeted. So that, but that's not in the 250, is it? estimated cost to complete there is 250. That doesn't include the 50 for the kitchen. No. Right. So. And then stage 3 includes the kitchen pontoon, which is you've just referred to, at 45. The boat ramp, where did it go? It's back in stage 1. Yeah. Which one of those is being generously built at no cost? We've provided the material, that's the jetty. We bought the materials, is that right? And someone else is installing them? Yes. Yeah. No, 70 grand's worth of materials and then erect free of charge. Still correct.
It's the jetty material.
Sorry?
Is that the jetty material?
Yeah, we bought the material and then a group of tradesmen, quite a sorry.
We haven't looked at that.
No.
I'm sure. We've ordered the pontoon.
Yeah.
There may be some,
And they're putting it in free of charge as well.
Hasn't that get playing, hasn't stage 1 projects all been acquitted though? Those 2 grants? Get playing plus and DCP,
Get Playing Plus has.
which have been acquitted.
DCP, we've got till 31st of December. Which is just the,
We definitely haven't purchased those materials, so that's still to happen. But it won't matter. You could equip the program because we're over budget anyway. That's going to come from council revenue, isn't it? So should that be actually costed to stage 3? Given that we've only budgeted 400,000 this year, like that 70,000 won't have a revenue source, will it?
the 70 will be the direct community.
Oh, so there's still $70,000 not spent there.
So we've got to receive. Great. You have to spend it and fund it. There was 1.9 million in the budget.
We spent 2.05. Yes. That's why I thought it would look like it had all been spent, but it hasn't been yet. We've spent reserves and saved 70,000 for jetty materials. So there will be no impact on the budget for the jetty.
And
Okay. So everything that's in this report then, that is yet to be done, is funded. Or budgeted for, I should say. I'll repeat that, rephrase that.
on
Budget
page 48, the jetty is funded, the Currajong Drive is funded.
Yep. Jetty's back up there. Currajong Drive.
Once the, I have to check with Rick, but once the spillway is finished, that completes the lake construction, is that right?
Yes. There's, the other bits is filling of the water. So it's going to work.
But the actual construction,
Construction line is.
yeah, so as soon as that paving baskets are finished, then that project, stage 1 is
So,
finished except for the.
so the fill pipes from the bore have been taken from stage 1 to stage 4 costings. Is that in that 157,000 for water and sewage connections that are in stage 3, sorry? Or is that?
Mr. Mayor, you just asked a question about the water and sewage. The water and sewage, is that to the buildings, or are you
That's
asking
right.
if that water going into the hole as well as the building?
Well, I suspect it's both. Brett, do you know? So the 157,000 for water and sewage connections, that's water from the water dam and to,
From the highway into the clubhouse
yeah,
and some irrigation.
and from the bore to the dam. So it's,
That's about 80,000.
so just, obviously, I'm not an engineer, but working the distances in my head, is it cheaper to come off the road or is it cheaper just to tap into the pipe that fills the dam? Go to the clubhouse and the gardens. And let something go right through the bank, you just reduce it down and does that save you costs?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's metered separately. Coming off the mains of the clubhouse, and then off the new connection to the reservoir for the
Okay, yep, you wouldn't want to be watering gardens with water that you can use from somewhere else, okay. So, councillors, the other question that I've been talking extensively with staff about is this $88,000 for electric connection. That's just to get Ergon to put a pole in for us, not even that probably, that's just blowing my mind.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, going back a few years ago, it cost me 13.5 grand to put one pole on my block.
How much?
13.5, 15 years ago.
So what are we,
It was one pole.
this will be underground though, won't it?
No, it's coming over green, above green from south.
It would include a transfer. Future development in that area,
So we're paying for future development.
because we're the first developer.
Through
The costs.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Final story of mine out there, I complained and letters in whatever, reduced to $3,000.
Sorry, can you say that again? If we complain, you might get it down.
They billed me, or wanted to bill me 13,500. So I complained and wrote a few letters and made a few phone calls here and there. And then they'll come back and reduce that bill to $3,000. So there is a possibility through that avenue somewhere to get some sort of a cut off that cost.
Mr. Mayor, we did the same thing with a block of dirt over at Blackhawk that my daughter purchased in Blackhawk. It was, from off the top of my head, it was around $12,000 reduced to 5 or 6 by just writing one letter. That was only 2 years ago. It was only, sorry, 3 years ago. Sorry, that was only 3 years. So it might be worth inquiring a little bit more about that.
We can do that, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, we can. Because we haven't gone back to them yet, have we? We just received their initial estimation.
For good reason.
We didn't go back because we're also using them as a source of water, but $88,000 is a lot of money to pay for power. They'd buy me a lot of diesel to run these big generators we got. And that's like, wow.
We will speak with Ergon and see what the options are.
And so the gravel pathway, that's inset on the apex of the bank, is that correct? Like a walking path, is the perimeter of the track?
And that's why councillor 37.
Yep. And kitchen fit out, landscaping, that's those that are in the garden committee who are all out of, not committee, but advisory group, are all out of the room, but that's to, somebody fill me in?
Oh, well, we've had a landscape management plan done for the whole precinct, and with Neil Fisher's guidance and advice, we're going to break it into a number of stages. So stage one was discussed the other day with the project team and a number of the leadership team. So we're really looking to spend that $30,000 on the main entrance so that as you arrive or as you drive past, it looks a very desirable site from, as soon as we can make that start to happen.
All right, that's my questions for now. Councillor Rogers.
I'm happy with what I've heard. Thanks. Yeah.
Councillor Nancy.
I think all my questions have already been asked and answered.
Asked and answered, that's a good step. Councillor Gleeson, where are you at?
Yeah, no, they're, I think you've gone through as much as I can handle. The water, you're connecting into those, the one question I was going to ask for Cole's sake actually, you're connecting into that line up there. By connecting in that line, there's obviously been done a lot of homework done. There's not going to interfere with any person's up the Sandwood Drive and
It's a connection for a clubhouse, we like adding another residence. The longer term plan for the gardens themselves is to irrigate out of the lake itself.
when we come to the future items for consideration, a lot of those things are going to have to be done before it's open.
Not really. Like the next just could be a lovely thing to have, but it's not required as essential to open it. Landscaping, well, that's identified. That's just more landscaping than more need. So those items are under that black bold italics, I think. Then once this is established to a usable, presentable location, it then becomes a community asset like a showgrounds or a racetrack or a campground. It then competes for funding priorities from grant applications that council sits down and says, right, well, this year we'll, and it needs to, my other point about this is we need very shortly to, and obviously we need water, so it's all contingent on that, but we need to get a user group. We need a club. We need someone to be the point of contact so that council's not, because there are grant opportunities out there for both asset and infrastructure upgrades that council can't apply for example. So if we had a group, a body, people who are going to promote this, then they come to us just like the Show Society comes to us, or Westec comes to us and says, we need a new shed, or the Rugby League come and want a shed extension. It would be exactly the same with whatever the Buckle and Recreation Rec Park Club, whatever you call it, whatever they call themselves. They come and say, oh, can we have an extra couple of barbecue areas? So then it just fits at the moment. And it's probably been the sole reason for a bit of hostility, but friction around is it has been led and developed by council officers primarily, like with oversight. Obviously we get reports and drawings, but the key impetus and creativity behind this has been predominantly internal because there's no external stakeholder group to actively engage with. And I sense the frustration of councillors who have MPIs in elements of this project because there's elements of it that they'd like to be involved in. But that's a separate issue altogether. Those future items, I think that's a conversation for when, the pathways would be the opportunity maybe to turn a gravel pathway into a concrete pathway. We might get more cycle path money. Well, I'm not that good on a push bike. I don't know if I want to ride around the top of the dam on a push bike. So those things are definitely a budget away from us looking at them because we want someone else to come in. But we need it before we open it to be something that's not going to be turning people away from it because we want to use it as an economic development initiative, hence why it's been developed internally. So it's got to do that. It's got to be able to have the capacity to do that, and then future development comes with a bit of community leading. All right, any other questions? You got an answer for 348 yet? No. 3, 4, 10. As Rick's leaving the room, could you send the others back in, please? For the benefit of councillors, as So, councillors, just for transparency, Rick's leaving as a partner within GBA. They're obviously the people who are on the other side of this conversation a little bit. That's appropriately, he felt it appropriate that he be absent for the discussion. So we've agenda item 3, 4, 10. Questions?
So they're following the report last month to council. Council asked for it to be represented with more information. So, since then I've contacted the maintenance company, asked them how we can do it more efficiently. They've come back with an alternative price. That's
Partly because you volunteered the use of staff to help. Like, it wasn't that you talked them down because they were ripping you off, it's just that they said, well, if you've got people that can assist, I can lower my cost.
yes, one person. They need one person. So,
And a tank.
yes. So to do the maintenance, they need 3 people, 2 workers and a spotter. So they had to do a special trip, whereas they do it as part of their annual maintenance run, which only has 2 people. Reduces the cost and just have to have someone there with a confined spaces licence. One of our workers be on site while they're working.
Questions?
I've provided information on both the Australian standards and the international standards. Now, we don't, to access those standards, you have to pay a subscription, which I haven't done. 350 bucks. To access it, we're relying, when I spoke to the maintenance man, he said this is the standards you must comply with. And that's what they're doing, the maintenance under those standards. I've also provided as attachment the original council resolution back in 2009 and the original quote.
Mr Mayor, can I ask, through you please? GBA has made a loss on the sale of Jet A fuel of 9,900 over the last 6 years.
Buying it at one price and selling it at the other.
They've got 68 litres per year per annum is what they're selling.
Yes.
So if you work it out at 10 cents, you know, you're looking at $6,800 a year. By the 6 years, even if you go 7, that's 42,000. How do they make a loss?
They so they pay wages for someone to go out and fill the planes at 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever time the flying doctor comes in.
Right?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I understand that's a minimal allowance given to those that do go out there. It's not penalty rates at.
No,
No, it's
money.
still wages.
Like, flying doctor landed here last night at 8 o'clock. No one had to go and fuel.
But I understand it's a $20 allowance. It's not $100 an hour.
It's still
6 years. Not, that's not per year. That's 6 years, so that's only, they've lost $3,000 a year. No, not even.
And
only
Mr Mayor, there's
$1,500
no,
a year.
That's $1,500 a year. That
1,500 a year.
Yeah, that's,
So their insurance,
but there's no mention of profit or loss on Avgas.
they've given us
we're not
those
talking
figures.
about, well,
But
no, it's not,
what
Gen
we're
8 one's
talking-
all we're doing here, Avgas, it's not being inspected.
Yeah, but
The loss
the licensee does both.
Yes,
Okay, so there is
I've got both.
the possibility that,
No, well, the Avgas is making more of a loss than the Jet A1.
I struggle with that.
so
Well, I've got 6 years figures that they've provided me, and,
No, 6 years figures even on the Avgas say, I understand from people I know in the fuel industry that they work on about 16, 18 cents. And on your Avgas there, you've got nearly 80,000 litres. And if you work it out at 10 cents, it's $8,000 a year. Then you've got, on top of that, your jet fuel.
You're assuming that they move it as often as everyone else does, the price.
No, they're saying the sales there, mate.
No, you're assuming that they move the pricing as often as, you know what I mean? Like if you want to stay in front of fuel, you've got to move it daily. Price of fuel goes up and down. You've got to move your price at the same time. So they may not be doing that. They may be just,
You'd have to move your price depending on every time you filled up and what the price was each time you filled up.
well, I think if you really want to make sure you don't lose, you move as the fuel price index moves. So you could have bought fuel yesterday at one price, you don't sell it for that price until they run out of it. You move, if the price goes up, you go up, because you're going to, plenty of times you're going to let you go the other way with fuel. Not too many people get rich out of selling, like how many surveys, not a get rich quick scheme.
surveys, that's about 4 cents a litre. The margin of fuel.
But I don't, hang on, John, all I'm sort of thinking here is that that's them doing that, so they want to lose money on it, they lose money on it, not us.
So they're partly saying, well, part of the problem is their pricing. You're right. They didn't adjust their prices when they should have been. So they were underpricing the fuel.
I'll contest the 4 cents on the fuel because I've got a friend who's been in fuel for a long, long time now, Charlie. He says it's 6 cents.
Well, we see what it is because we buy fuel from these local service stations, we know what their price is. We're not guessing.
Yeah, I know, but that's what we would allow them to put on.
No, we know what we buy it for, we know what they buy it for and we know what they sell it for. Not to us, we don't go and blow their thousands. The day we take 20,000 litres off them, they buy it at the same, they've got to have to show us the invoice they buy it at. That's part of the process for buying fuel. They show us the invoice, they get the allowance on top of that. So all you've got to do is walk down the street with what they give it to us and have a look at what's coming out of the bowser for and you can work on the percentage.
But you're saying we as in Buckhorn Regional Council?
Yes.
We set that price, didn't we? We set that 3 cents.
Well, we don't set their bowser price. They set
So
that.
you're saying when you walk down there, they're just 4 cents over what they're selling it. What?
Or
Yeah.
Well,
4
now-
cents over what you see.
in 4%, I said. Cent, I said, not cents.
Mr. Mayor, going back to the resolution.
Yeah, that on GBA one, if that's what their loss is, well, they could be, if they're throwing it back in at us, then that's relevant, but.
Mr Mayor, I do have a query. I asked for considerable information on this subject in particular based on the last meeting and don't feel that I've got the information that I asked for.
Can you give me a point?
Well, I asked for current maintenance schedules for the asset, summary of the information provided to BRC by the service provider, so inspection applicable standard. In part, we've got the estimated provided quote. Any user agreements connected to the fuel supply, the current contractual arrangements, and a summary of the current situation, which we have got. But in my intention of that is whose contractual requirement is this inspection fee? If it's council's, then we've been reckless or not reckless, negligent in not having it budgeted in for a 10-year service. The reason behind wanting to know what standard it goes against, is it a statutory check, is it a mandatory check, or is it an advised 10-year period?
On the first one, on the contractual stuff.
The only contract we have is what I've provided
That's it.
as the attachment.
Through you, Mr Mayor, with the testings and standards, because of my gas industry experience, it is a mandatory government standard that must be met. Even for a 5-year or 10-year term.
That's
So
gas,
this resolution,
Gas, fuel, all takes, because we've got air tanks and so we're air tanks that must be tested to the Australian standard.
so Brett, this, which attachment is the only contractual stuff? The attachment with the resolution, or?
Well, combined with the letter, because the resolution is we've agreed to the what GBA has proposed at the time.
Yep.
So we don't specifically have a contract and user agreement. Interesting. Because depending on the category of tank, they vary from 10 years, 15 years, depending on the application and the components. From my research.
So, Northern Fuel and Maintenance are saying that that standard is a 10-year standard, is that it?
I'm all for trusting officers and commercial suppliers, but I would also like to verify it. But I am only one. I'm all for the extended use of the fuel supply, especially for the RFDS. It's just,
Especially on that volume, that surprised me, the volume.
yeah, and I think the commercial sale rate of the contractor, it's impacted us as council. Like if they have intentionally or unintentionally sold fuel at a loss, I don't think we've been rigid enough around our maintenance requirements. Like if we knew 10 years ago that there's a 10-year inspection coming up, we needed a budget for that. And that needed to be in this year's budget. And if it's not in a contract, especially we needed a budget for it.
That's right, this came out of the blue, and it only, well, councillors raised it, we obviously.
That's another area of concern,
It
Mr. Mayor,
wasn't raised with us.
because there was giggles in the chamber when I brought it up a month ago. Yeah.
So, what do you just want to do? Deputy CEO's flag here, the resolution to actually do exactly what you're saying there. We enter into a formal agreement so that we are more cognizant of what we have to do moving forward. Or when we have to do it, more to the point, what and when. When's as important as what. If it's only every 10 years, well, there's every chance this room's going to look very different in 10 years if someone doesn't have the capacity to flag this. Within that formal agreement, I flagged this perhaps discussion for next year's budget around making the facility unmanned. In terms of change the card reader so no one has to go out there. Most of that avgas, or what from my inspections, a lot of that avgas is actually property sales, literally property sales. Fellas turn up there with 3 drums of avgas and they fill them up to take out the helicopter mustering. So if that could be filled up external to the air side of the airport, and the same, if somebody lands there in the middle of the night and they walk up with their credit card and swipe the card and pay for it, it helps GBA, but you know, if we could get some funding to do that, that could be part of this formal agreement. Those sort of things, but obviously that requires a little bit of fence changing, Brett, but not significant amounts.
Yeah, it just requires another fence, Mr. Mayor. No, GBA gets no benefit out of this. And all they're doing it as a community service. They,
I would say that if they are a user of some of the fuel. No, I'm talking about Jet A1,
No.
Avgas.
Avgas.
Yeah, well-
Yes, but not.
So if they are losing money on both fuel supplies and they are a considerable user of the Avgas, then their business is making a small profit on not paying standard rates for fuel.
The Mayor, I assume though that their travel costs are unchargeable to whoever they're working for, so it's not a point of they're not making profit there. It's fully recovered from whoever they're working for.
Well, it begs the question, why aren't their charge rates at least cost recoverable?
Which is what they've done now.
No, I think you'll find they've realised that they've been
what's
slack.
been happening. And
They've
now
lost
they're-
money.
This is how this has come up.
There hasn't been much of visibility of it, it's just when it's empty, get fuel, fill it up, sell it.
Mr Mayor, through the authorising of Chief Executive Officer into a formal agreement for the supply of fuel, could we look at that the next maintenance cost be part of GBA? We do this one, formalise it that
And they've got to price their
And
fuel
they've
so
got
they cover that.
future costs for the supply of fuel and everything, plus the maintenance, won't be borne by us.
So has the maintenance been getting borne by us, or is there no maintenance? No,
They have an annual maintenance.
they do it or we do it.
They do it. So they've been paying, so part of that.
I'm talking about the
Cost.
10-year maintenance.
Yeah, I'm just checking annual
Okay.
maintenance.
So every year they'd be having their annual maintenance run. But then every 10 years you have to do that.
So there, if you're not careful, they can factor in, even if you are just pricing your fuel to make sure you're covering your costs. If you don't cover it, it might cost you $2 or $3 grand a year to get someone to do a bit of maintenance, whatever the annual maintenance on it is. Replace a hose could cost you, could be $800 for a new pull-out hose reel. So pretty quickly you can run to a $1,600 loss if you've only broke even. If their intent was to break even with what they buy and sell it for, that's all well and good, but their annual maintenance fees, even if it is $5, they do that 20 times, all of a sudden there's a couple $100 there, and it would be $20, probably not $5. Anyway, if they're paying the annual maintenance, I think that's a good solution. They know that part of the formal agreement moving forward is that they pay all or part of the 10-year. It certainly is a benefit to this community what they do there. I'm not saying that it's not mutually beneficial, but it does provide a benefit to us to have that. We don't have to pay. But bear in mind, if we operated in its current form, if we'd have been operating for 10 years, obviously I want to go unmanned, it should be unmanned, but we're not operating it. So if we were operating it and we were getting a call-out fee for someone to go up there for half an hour, fill up 3 Avgas drums, we would be losing thousands a month. So you look at 27,000 over, it's for us, that cost for the last 10 years. If we haven't had to pay anything else, if we're not paying annual maintenance, which I'm assuming, I'm hearing, it's cost us $2,700 a year to have that facility.
Through you, Mr Mayor, what would be the cost to us? Is it over 100,000? Is it if GBA decided that they didn't want to enter into that agreement with us and just said, you take it on then, what's the risk for us then?
Whatever it costs to turn it unmanned, because we physically do not have the money or the manpower to man it outside of work hours, and even then I'd suggest we'd be limited. Flying doctor don't conveniently arrive between 7 and 3,
And we would have to.
4 days a week.
We'd have to supply our own tank. I mean, that's all theirs. It's all
No,
GBA.
that's all ours.
No, that's our tank.
ours.
That's our tank.
So the new above ground tank was the one that was replaced 10 years ago.
The alternative is that we charge a lease fee of $2,700 a year. pay the maintenance in 10 years' time.
Yes, Brett, although I think you and I both know in 10 years it won't cost the same as it's costing today. I think what we talked yesterday, you've got to look at what, so if they just know that the maintenance cost is theirs, well then they factor in. But, yeah, we can't afford to run it. But we can operate it remotely, but like as in unmanned, but that will require an infrastructure setup. And then I've had this conversation 20 times with Brett since we were out there. The problem then is we could go to all that trouble and they don't use it, well then.
And do we have I suppose it's in kind or a costing for us to supply? Don't we have to supply our fuel reservoir all the?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
good.
So
We need
is
to
there?
find out.
Can that be? I don't know, organised with the refuelers so that they, or is that a considerable cost?
It's just finding a tank that you can pump the fuel into while they do the maintenance, then you pump it back.
We could have one of our own.
So if you've got a tank, you just need to find a fuel tank.
Is there cross-contamination issues there with putting it into diesel or unleaded and then back into an airplane? I'd really like to be in a rotary wing and
Well, Jet A1, they use diesel all the time in Jet A1 aircraft.
the,
I've done it. So, yeah, diesel and Jet A1 stack close together, it's not funny. But I'm not sure.
Well, he just said he got last time he just found a BP tanker.
yeah, well, they may well have
Tolerance.
but they might have a specific cleaner that
Yeah.
they put into a tank to flush it out and
Or a
run in and
filtration
gas and
system
all
on
that
the
sort
way
of
back.
stuff. Yeah,
Well, he even said that because they did the two tanks at the same time last time, and he emptied one into BP tanker, and he emptied the other one into the other tank, and then back again.
Scares you to know what they do when you don't know, doesn't it? You're better off not knowing the answer to that question, I think.
Mr. Mayor, I worked on the railways too. I won't go on the train anymore.
Honestly, I have refueled those big rescue choppers where they've got out of range and they've had no Jet A1, but they just pump straight diesel into them. And they reduce, by however many hours they burn diesel for as opposed to Jet A1, there's a calculation that reduces their service life. They can't use avgas in a Jet A1, but you can use diesel. It's very unrefined, Jet A1. Have you had to do that before, Bob?
Yeah, with your diesel on the other side.
There you go, I learned something, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, people get surprised by it, but yeah, just up the road, the chopper from Mackay can make it to just into our area, but can't make it home, so they refuel on site. It's pre-positioned A1 now, but anyway.
Also, pump once a month and off without gas into helicopters and have to leave the drum out so that you don't pick up quite so much water.
He's not going to fly anytime soon, Right, councillors, can we come to some decision here, please? Are we paying this? Are we not paying it? Are we pushing it
Mr.
back?
Mayor, considerable improvement on last month's figures and predominantly because of the communal effect, not just to our council area, but to others with the flying doctors. I don't see an option not to.
Deputy CEO, are you prepared to note the comments around future maintenance?
I think there
That
needs to be a little bit
formal
more rigidity around.
We will have to negotiate with GBA, let's see, of how we proceed in the future. And it may be that this continues for 12, 18 months, and we go to unmanned, or we need to come to some agreement.
Probably also, an extension of that issue is the underground tank. What sort of lifespan have we got on it?
Where are we at? This could be next year with it.
Yeah,
Well, talking to one of the partners, he's told me that they own the underground tank, not council.
oh, okay.
So I haven't been able to confirm that, but he said that's totally their responsibility.
You almost let them think that would. We'll find out a bit more about that, so let's stick to the issue at hand. I can see us getting sidetracked. Councillor People's got a question?
Yeah, A continues to support the supply of jet aviation fuel in Park Auburn.
Yep.
We supply the fuel, do we?
Support the supply of it.
Support the supply.
So,
Yeah.
If we didn't support it, well, we wouldn't be paying the 27,000. It's probably more a statement. A is a statement of intent.
So they supply, we're doing the maintenance.
Yep.
And the deputy CEO, or acting CEO, is going to have a look at the future maintenance
The formal agreement around.
being part of GBA's contract. Okay.
Move on. Councillor Arthur. Seconded Councillor Peoples. Those in favour? Motion carried 7-0. Thanks, Rick. He heard me too. He's just going to make you get up, Kenny. No, he's good.
Put the button on green. One on green.
Is that me now?
You out now.
Yes,
Right, can I have somebody or any discussion? Sorry, this resolution here 3411. Brett, do you need to lead us through the background of this?
Mr Mayor, this is consistent with what we've done in previous years. It's a wet and dry plant hire tender. We have been calling tenders every second year, but last time we called tenders, we agreed that at the 12-month mark we would allow new suppliers to enter the list and for existing suppliers to update their prices. And then it becomes a rolling 2-year contract. So whatever year you come in, you have to renew for 2 years from when you come in. So next year, all the contractors from 2019 will have to reapply. But for this year, it's allowing new contractors and existing contractors to update their prices. So I think there was 30 new suppliers and numerous existing contractors updated their prices. The whole process was done by Peak Services on our behalf, so it's totally independent, aligned with all the contracting rules.
Questions?
These, Mr Mayor, these tenders, not vendor panel. This is tenders.
So this is a tender, a pre-approved right to be a tenderer via vendor panel. So you're pre-qualified. Vendor panel uses pre-qualified suppliers. So they're exempt from having to comply with all the rules of tendering every time they do it. You know, unit higher prices, that sort of stuff. And if they're on there, if they're on our list, forget vendor panel. If they're on the list and there's an emergent need, operators can be grabbed to come straight onto a job at the price they list on this tender.
Yes. So they're pre-approved. Yeah, it's pre-approved. It's almost, yeah, it's a pre-approval to be on to work for us. And so by going through this process, we've checked all their insurances, etc. But we still call for quotes on vendor panel.
And they don't have to use the price they submit now. In fact, they invariably don't. They're nearly always lower.
But as the Mayor said, if I need a grader tomorrow, for some reason, I could bring someone on this list and call them in if it's an emergency or, and if we have to use, they have to use that price, whatever they've quoted in this.
So, yeah, if we're in the middle of a significant main roads job, one of the graders breaks down and Rick needs to grade it on the job immediately, hasn't got time to call for vendor panel because it A needs it tomorrow and B doesn't need it very long because ours is fixed, bang, in it goes. If we have a major storm damage and we just want to call every bit of gear we can get, we don't have time for quotes, they come in, they're paid at that rate.
You can only do that for 4 days or 5 days at a time, is that right?
Unless a genuine emergency exists, yes. Like, if we were in the middle of a major catastrophe trying to rebuild the road, the last thing we'd be worried about is calling quotes. Like, if the road got washed away from Aramac to Muttaburra, oh, that'd be,
It's an emergency.
yeah,
It's emergency, yeah, it's not, yeah.
But
The job supervisor can't go and,
it's 7 days actually, isn't it?
the other thing is that this gives us a list of who to send the vendor panel quotes to.
So on that,
Know who all the suppliers, the graders are, who all the rollers, yeah, they're all there on the list. And they're the ones that get the quotes.
the reason I asked, the main reason I just asked that question is because I know and you know that there's lots of people out there that are not on that list. But they obviously didn't want to be on that short list.
this is our only one.
Sorry,
No, some of them are already on the list. This is not going to be the new list.
These ones that are updated.
Yeah, so that's my question, officers. Could I have some advice about adding those non-local tenderers to our list? As in, hasn't been pre-existing practice for them to be admitted to the list.
they're all, to me, they all go on the list, but they're a category
Zero.
category 0 tenderer. We still may need them, even if they're not local, if
And there's 0, 1, 2, is there 3 categories?
0, 1, 2.
Yes.
So we always go to the cat 1 and 2 first. But like rollers, there's no rollers for hiring locally. You have to go outside of them.
Do we need our own list for that though? Can't we just use like a what? What is it? We don't need to use our list for that. We can actually use any other local government's list if we wanted to.
This has been the practice of how we develop a list.
We have in years gone by not approved them. To go on and only approve locals, haven't we? Has that been found to be disadvantageous operationally?
They're still on the approved list, but they're not necessarily on our vendor panel list.
For you,
The
Mr.
vendor
Mayor.
panel will have the locals on there. We need something that's, if suppliers who are not on vendor panel, then we need to go outside of vendor panel.
For you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I can't remember not putting them on. We put them on the list, but they were 0. Like everyone went on the list, but they were 0, so they wouldn't, unless it was a real emergency, they would.
Councillors, I'm in your hands.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Brett, there's nothing unforeseen here. You're happy with this list? All good?
There are a couple of suppliers who scored low, but in the past we haven't penalised them. Yeah, we haven't had a cut-off where you had to score a certain amount to get on the list. Basically, everyone who's supplied the information implemented, if we wanted to be more refined in the way we operate, then certainly have a cut-off score that they must achieve.
Agree, Mr Mayor, the cut-off score, though, like, they would have had to comply though with the regulations to get on there. They can't, the low score isn't because they're not complying with regulations.
Yeah, it's the amount of detail that they've provided that we've asked. And those ones aren't list 3 there that are identified as probably 4 there that they're not locals. I don't think I've never known them to engage those companies.
Through you, Mr Mayor. You are happy with the list, Rick? Can I move that we go to the officer's recommendation up there, please, Mr Mayor?
Moved to Councillor Peebles, second to Councillor Gleeson. Are you in favour? Carried. Swap over there. Hey, Dan.
You're looking around.
You were, mine.
There's no chairs.
3, 4, well,
There you go. Talk about this one.
yep. So, out of sessions, councillors, I did ask you to discuss this. I am going to move this, and I was also going to ask to amend it that we drop in 21, because that's technically not correct. They receive half of it this year and half of it next year. We just drop it full stop after bursary. For the record and for the benefit of staff who weren't present, this was an extremely difficult process. I was honoured to be joined by Keith from GBA and Kate from West Tech. Judging this was very difficult. The quality of candidates was absolutely superb. It was an amazing reflection on the quality of people that we have seeking higher education, continuing higher education, undertaking manual trades, commitment and dedication from people that still at school through to people on that list who are undertaking PhDs whilst living, working and supporting our communities. Honestly, we could have picked another 5 or 6 and I am sure the community and council would have been extremely proud to have them as ambassadors by way of this scholarship. It's something that definitely, given the value of money we're talking here, we should be continuing to spend upon in future years. And I have mentioned the other sessions that we'd continue our conversations with our partners about how we look to do that and how frequently. I said in the front of the Gazette that went out, whenever it went out this week or late last week, that it shows the good, more than goodwill, it shows the genuine community interest that groups like West Tech and corporate employers such as George Gordon Associates have with their communities to help facilitate this. And I would look to be extending that with other partners that we're entering into arrangements with as well, because it's pretty tough if you live in regional Queensland to find the money to do university. People that come from cattle stations are almost immediately exempt from any form of help because most of the assistance for them is asset tested. If you live in town, you often don't have the income, or you've got challenging issues around distance. If you want to be full-time study when you're at university, finding time for work is difficult. If you're a full-time tradesman, how do you do a part-time job when you're full-time working from 7 o'clock in the morning or earlier till dark? The fact that some of these people have already written letters which will appear in next month's CIB, the genuine difference this will make to them is very helpful, and it may seem not much, 4,000, but in terms of going to take a university study, and there's people in this room who've done it full time, that's obviously a significant difference. So, I would actually like to move this resolution, please. And call for a seconder before any further comments. Councillor Peoples, any other comments?
Great initiative, Mr Mayor.
It
All
is.
three parties.
And I think, through you, Mr Mayor, I think it's even greater just now because I've got a nephew who's at university, and the part-time work that he was doing due to the COVID situation has dried up, so they're doing it even tougher during this period than they normally would.
Very good. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. Still no word for it. 3413. This is the big piece of paper that was handed out at the start of the day.
Mr Mayor, this is the plan that we developed as a result of COVID with QRA. We did have a workshop with councillors earlier on. So this is now the finalised plan which we will adopt, and hopefully we won't have to implement too much because hopefully COVID disappears sooner than later. But definitely the QRA wants this in place in case we do have an outbreak here. If something happens, then we need to how we have to deal with it.
Councillors, I think if you wanted to drill down into specifics to ensure relevance, they would be the section in green on the bottom left corner. That'll be correct, Deputy?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Recovery objectives, if you wanted to briefly read those before we endorse this, I'll cover it. If somebody's ready to move it, we can move on.
Mr Mayor. So we will have to do some of these things like supporting community clubs and organisations. So, you know, once life becomes normal again, if you can put it that way, we will have to provide support, we will have to do work with tourism. So, you know, I know those objectives are general, but a lot of them are general, but there's still work to be done, especially with events. Get our communities active again.
Just on, as an example, on objective 9, there was a significant point of discussion between Mayor Hayes and I yesterday and his team and our team about how we would develop different initiatives around tourism. So those sort of objectives are being pursued. With your indulgence, may I move, somebody move this please? Councillor Plum, second, Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? Carried. Plan can be adopted at any stage, amended at any stage. So if you detect anything in here or if you think it's a brainstorm, foreshadow it and we'll move it. 3.
Mr Mayor, sorry to interrupt, but can I just ask, have we got anything here about, you know, the ongoing recovery and support from state and federal government? I read those bottom sections in the green, but is there anything else there on that line? Roads and transport, constantly. Maybe down the track we can have a look at that.
Flights is definitely mentioned, so roads and transport.
And there's, you know, looking at funding streams for community clubs and
Yeah,
organisations.
same with community clubs and organisations, but local government too. Doesn't need to be now, Mr Mayor, it's just something we might look at down the track to add.
Yep. 351 financial report. Somebody move that we receive the report, please. Councillor Plum, second. Councillor Peoples. Those in favour, carried. 7-0. Anything that you would like to identify before I go to questions, Brett or Jenny?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, obviously with our new reporting system, we're into the second month. I think the real value of it will be the end of September. So at the October meeting, we'll have the first quarter's figures. That's when you will really have some substance. This report, in terms of the cash balance was 16.1 million at the end of August.
When do you look at that, Brett?
So very last, if you look at the very last page. So as of yesterday, that page and the second last page. So as Ewan said yesterday, the first thing you should read is the statement of cash flows.
So would it be possible for it to be the first report?
I'd like to look for it in that.
No, I wouldn't like not to look for it. Leader of our Secret Service Society.
So the second last page, we can make that the first report. Yeah, so your statement of cash flows, the cash balance is the bottom line there, which is also the top line on the balance sheet on the next page. So we've had receipts of just over 4 million for the 2 months, payments of 5.8 million, payments for property, plant and equipment, which is mainly roads, at 1.7 million, and capital grants received at 1.9. So our cash has gone down by 1.5 million over 2 months, which is to be expected, given that we got federal assistance grant, financial assistance grant, FA grant in advance at the end of June. So that went into last year. We got $9 million in flood damage in advance. So we're spending that money now. We've already received it in the previous year.
So Brett, in saying that, you got 9 million in flood damage. And what was the fares?
3.9 we received in advance.
So is that saying that there's 12 million off the 16 that we've got to spend?
Not quite. Because we spent some of that 9 million, it was down to 6.8, I think, at the end of the year. So 6.8 plus 3.9.
So
10.7, but then you got to take 2 months out of that 3.9 off. So it's about 10 million.
Yeah, 10, yeah.
But the real of those graphs, the real effect will be seen at the end of September. We'll have 3 months of the first quarter. So, how we're travelling then. In terms of the other reports, the rates levies, their arrears have gone right down. So obviously quite a few people paid their rates after the discounts, so they've been paying them down, because there was a bit of a worry there when we were up fairly high, 11%. It's down to 4.75%.
Just
in
to see if the
arrears,
next one, just as the next one comes.
Yes, so next month it'll be up again because
We're issued on Monday.
what's the due date? It's probably after the next meeting.
It is.
Just before, isn't it?
Yeah. Because our meeting's a week late next month. Right, questions? Being none. 3, 6, 2. No, sorry, I'm way over the line. 3, 6, 1. It'll depend on the questions, won't it? Yep. Goal 4 was yours and was yours. Your what goal?
Four was 1 and 3.
Right. Rick, what would you like us to know that you haven't written here or expand upon to save you writing?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the TMR projects for Colonel Alpha and Capricorn Highway, I'm still waiting on TMR to send some information on that. We get them rolling.
Are they likely to be different types of projects? No, just standard.
The Colonel Alpha job is going to stand with what we've done previously. Capricorn Highway, they're doing widening only, so they can get further as they can for their money. To give us an idea of where it's going to be, it's just a matter of now getting their ducks in a row, give it over to us. We've got to do cultural heritage assessments on the front alpha stuff. That's holding it up a little bit now. That's not going to be done until early October. But we're hoping we'll be able to get the information from TMR for pricing between now and then if we're approved.
Okay. Any more questions, bearing in mind who yours, if you have them, just let Councillor Arthur know if it's about a contract, but I don't think there's anything here.
Mr Mayor, through you to Rick, pretty sure I mentioned a long time ago, mate, about the boundary grid between on the Ilfracombe Road.
We have reported that to TMR.
Okay.
I'll follow up again and see where it's at.
I'm not going to hit it too hard and flip to at some stage. It's just sinking all the time.
We've spoken a number of times.
Okay.
I'll follow up.
Thank you.
It's happening already.
Councillor Gleeson?
Mr Mayor, through you, I'd just like to ask a question that's been asked of me, and because you're head of the Works Department.
Yeah.
The other day I was informed that there was graders and machinery not working because
Councillor, I'd like to move into closed session. I'm more than happy to have the conversation. I welcome the question. Can somebody back me with moving into closed session now, please? Thank you, Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried.